Turns out, nights without electricity were actually more cheerful than nights with electricity. The North Sphere members of Sector 8 used it as an excuse to hang out together for one night and roast a type of candy that had a lot of the same properties as a marshmallow in a fireplace in one of the lounges, tell jokes and ghost stories, and the like. It felt like a camping trip humans on Earth had. Everyone was more rowdy and friendly with each other, talking without a care in the world, like the apocalypse didn't exist. Arda suspected it was partly because everyone wanted to distract the friends of the deceased member, though it might have also been because of the alcohol that was supposed to be used as fuel source for the fire, as wood was scarce. He guessed around a third of bottles of wine were actually not so secretly passed around for everyone to take a few swigs out of. Arda settled down near the back on the floor, and a few minutes later, Blake, who had gotten a bottle of wine somewhere, approached. He grabbed a nearby blanket and dragged it over, throwing it on the ground next to him, and collapsing on it with a grunt, nearly falling on Arda. "So," Blake said, his speech slurring, "I heard that you were gonna help us with some chores around here." Arda, without needing to think about it, snatched the bottle out of his hands just as he tipped it up to drink from it. He pushed Blake to sit upright with his other arm. "Why are you drinking?" Arda asked. "You're underage." Blake glared at Arda half-heartedly. "Hey! I don't know what the drinking age for your world was, but here on Zeta it was officially 18 and I'm... You were found 16 years ago, so you can't be older than 17, Arda pointed out. "And you'll thank me later in the morning when you're the only one who doesn't have a headache." "Lies and slander," Blake muttered. He reached for the bottle, which Arda held out of his reach, before he lost balance and fell on Arda's lap. He muttered some curse words that seemed to be the same as Earth's and just laid there. "So, you will help wash the dishes then?" "I have no qualms about that," Arda said, setting the bottle down well out of reach of Blake's greedy hands. "I'll be helping out with whatever they need another pair of hands for. And what's the attack about?" Blake sighed, seemingly a bit more sober than a second ago. "The Imperials have been a lot more active lately, and they attacked one of our transport lines a week ago. We got word from command to launch a counterattack. We also have reasons to believe they've been planning to take over our territory for a while, so we're sending a message." Arda nodded. "Well then, you get some sleep. You promised to the Colonel to go out early tomorrow and get the windmill working." He groaned. "Right, salvaging. I need to scrape together a team." "I can come along," Arda suggested. The blonde shook his head, which was still on his lap. "Nah, salvaging is more dangerous than it sounds. Hawks, rodents, large cats, they're everywhere. Insects too. Immortal or not, you're not invincible and might get in our way. Sorry, not sorry." Blake patted his shoulder. "Don't get too emotional when you don't see me tomorrow. I'll come back." "I will see you tomorrow in the morning, and that will be plenty." "You wound me, Mr. Emotionless Robot. I'm willing to sign you up for the most tedious tasks." "If I were a robot, I wouldn't have any trouble with them, so go ahead." "Shh, quiet, I'm going to sleep." "You have a blanket, sleep on that." Instead of responding, Arda looked down to see Blake's breathing evening out, his eyes closed. He couldn't help wondering how he fell asleep so fast. He considered moving Blake onto the blanket, but in the end, just sighed and leaned back against the wall, closing his multicolored eyes as well. Arda helped with simple chores around the underground house for the next few days. Washing the dishes, counting resources, sorting through the newly arrived supplies, assisting the medics. He found that the people on Zeta, though they had many similarities with people on Earth, also had many differences. Zeta's currency, for example, was entirely digital. "We actually didn't have one global currency until like 30 years ago," Blake had told him, on Arda's 5th day on the planet, a day after he went on the successful salvaging expedition. But trade between us Northspheres and the Nomads happened, and the Nomads were trading with the Imperialists, and who were trading with the South Spheres. It was a whole chain, but anyway, that happened, and eventually everyone began using Luna as their currency, named after our moon. It just made things more convenient. There wasn't any internet either, as all satellites were destroyed by the moon's debris or messed up by the ring that formed after. Their usual form of communication was usually through human messengers who would cross from sector to sector, delivering digital letters with a tablet that acted a lot like a phone, which could be used for short-distance communications. They did have a network of radio transceivers that could get messages to the other sectors quicker, but it was for extreme emergency purposes, as they suspected the Imperialists camped by some of them to try and sniff out the news. The Northsphere military's primary weapon were guns, but they were much smaller than guns on Earth, and instead of bullets they used tiny poisonous magnets that stuck to their targets and paralyzed them with the poison. We're aiming for non-lethal weapons, Jada, the girl who seemed to have beef with Blake, had explained, when they both were on duty for checking the armory. She loaded a gun and held it toward a target on the other end of the room. She pulled the trigger twice in quick succession. A blue light pulsed twice on a line down the barrel of the gun for a split second before something shot out. The magnets whizzed through the air almost silently before they hit dead center, the second magnet directly on top of the first. She lowered the gun and flipped her hair around behind the shoulder. It's also quiet and effective, much better than the flashing ones the Imperialists used. The poison is short-term and not all fatal to humans. The magnets can mess with their boots and knock them off the roads. But it's also expensive, Arda said matter-of-factly, having picked up a gun himself and examining it. The poison and the magnet. You have to use it sparingly. They're not so easy to find, are they? Jada seemed pleasantly surprised. She held the gun up, twirling in her hand, obviously very comfortable with it. You're bright. I like it. We need bright people and not dense ones like Blake, who has a block of wood for a head. And please tell him I said that. I will. In 3 days, Arda had counted a total of 16 earthquakes, shaking the underground shelter ruthlessly, not giving anyone a break. 6 times it had been at night, and there were large earthquakes. Couldn't be less than 6 on the Richter scale. So Arda was surprised when barely anyone woke up to them. During the day, the earthquakes reached a 7 on the scale, and Arda couldn't help but express his surprise at the fact that the shelter was still holding up well. When it happened, everyone had to pause in their work and lean against a wall, or grab onto something stable. It would usually last a minute or so before going away, and when that happened, everyone went on with their duties like this happened every day. A 7! Meaning an earthquake that could cause major damage and the loss of people's lives. At least it could have on Earth. The shelter was unbelievably steady, and while cracks did appear, nothing disastrous had happened inside. Yet. By comparison, the great 1906 San Francisco earthquake on Earth had a magnitude of 7.9. Several times, Arda heard that someone nearly fell off a road or a building when the earthquake hit, which made him wonder if the buildings and roads outside were made of something different from stones or brick. How was the city even still standing? There were complaints, many protests on how the sector was run, how Northsphere in general was run. Though for now, no one was starving, but everyone was thin and hungry. Water wasn't as much of an issue, but food was a big concern. Arda had sorted through the food compartments and was forced to throw out an alarming amount of spoiled hawk, fish, and other animal meat, bread, corn that arrived on the transport line, and more. Even with the sub-zero temperatures, a lot of the meat went bad quickly, because the animals themselves didn't have very good diets most of the time. They were given out in small portions, only 1 or to 2 of them a day. The alcohol was reserved for emergencies if they needed a fire while conserving electricity, not for drinking. People protested Decarato all day and every day, particularly citizens who participated in running the shelter and preferred not to go to the surface. It was kept to a down low, but Arda could tell there were still foul moods and whispers around every corner. A lot of the people made up fantasies about how it was infinitely better in the Imperial Ring of the East, and talked about escaping there. Arda also heard people talk about the other sectors, closer to the ocean and frozen forests. Some of them had it a lot worse, but Norsphere was extremely lucky they were on the continent of Dorzak, one of the 3 continents of Zeta. It was a relatively small continent, but raised high above sea level after the apocalypse started, with resilient forests that provided some resources, albeit they had to use them sparingly lest the forests disappear completely. Sector 6 had it the worst. It was on the southern coast of Thorzak, so it had warmer temperatures, though the Celestial Bridge still blocked out most sunlight. While that was a good thing, they were in a city that had constant flash floods. With the warmer weather came more animals, particularly albatrosses, seagulls, seals, and other seafaring creatures. This not only meant they had to compete with the animals for food, but also meant, due to the dropping supply of fish in the ocean, the animals resorted to attacking humans. Being on the coast also meant more earthquakes, and they were pestered by storms every other day. It was a terrifying combination of natural disasters, making it by far the roughest sector of Norsphere. On the 9th day after he crash-landed, Blake told Arda he was coming with them on an overnight food scavenging expedition. "We will need it," the ash blonde mumbled through the red hair tie between his teeth, as he gathered his hair and pulled it up toward the top of his head. "Our counterattack is like in 4 days." "I'm glad you can count, Ponytail," Jada said, fixing her red tie before tucking 2 guns into her belt. She was coming with them, as well as a ginger named Tink, who was struggling to tie her own red tie. Arda still wasn't sure why everyone wore it, but he figured it was because it was a symbol for Norsphere. "Shut up, Jada. Anyways, we'll need to camp out overnight and come back tomorrow morning." Blake secured his hair with the hair tie. "And we're taking you because, no offense, you don't need any resources, Mr. Immortal." "It's a fact, no offense taken," Arda assured. He watched as Blake picked up a long, 2-meter-long green stick, with flat ends on both sides. He'd seen one like it before, in the storage room. It was magnetic and could stick to a wall in the event that someone was somehow knocked down, and was falling too far from the nearest path. He was also carrying a gun, but just one. He'd given his other to Arda, who had no experience with guns, but after weighing it in his hand and seeing Arda shoot it once in an armory, he knew he could hit an already moving target, at minimum. The Norsphere didn't seem to be short on equipment, but with people leaving in all sectors nearly every day, in one way or another, it was still to be used wisely. "Hope you don't break another one of those," Arda commented. "It took you 2 months to get that one back." "It was an accident," Blake insisted, though he looked a bit guilty. "I'm sorry, alright?" Arda turned to stare at Blake. "It's made of solid steel plate. How did you break it?" Blake dropped his arms and nearly dropped the stick. "How do you know what metal this is?" "Common observation." Arda was given an exasperated look. "And that doesn't answer my question." "I'm not answering your question because I don't know, but do you have to use your condescending tone? Now you're just making me feel bad." "I'm not using any tone. It's your imagination." Jada rolled her eyes. "Get a room, you two." Blake shot her a glare as he put on his mask and goggles. Jada completely missed it as she went to help Tink with her tie. It was early morning, and they were already standing on the stairs along with the daily patrol, waiting for the night patrol to come back. Arda pulled his visor up and clipped it behind his head, making sure it was secure. While he technically didn't need it, it felt wrong to have it hanging behind him, and decided he might as well put it on. The door suddenly swung open without warning, just as a patrol member went to open it, who nearly escaped being smacked in the face. The night patrol filed in, gave the day patrol their report, and headed down the stairs. It was snowing hard outside. The wind roared in their ears and the snow obscured most of their vision. Arda heard the occasional muffled crack of thunder snow in the distance. A thunder snowstorm, then. It was a terrible time to be out overnight with that weather. As the expedition and the patrol went out into the city, a member turned to them and said with a frown, "Blake, the night patrol told us there's been more imperialist activities far in the east. One of their scouts from the northeastern coast, they think." Blake frowned back. "We're heading to the eastern rural areas. Shoot. We'll have to drive them out then." "I think that would be best, but be careful. You're out to find food, not to find trouble." Jada jumped in. "Well, looking for food is looking for trouble. There are 2 rings in the disc, 2 ends to a magnet." 2 rings in a disc and 2 ends to a magnet were apparently another slang that was replaced after the apocalypse started. A synonym would be 2 peas in a pod. "We'll be careful," Blake promised. Or try to be. Maybe not promised, then. "Well, good luck," the patrol member said before leaving with its other 2 members. Blake turned to the other 3 in the expedition. "You heard him. Let's be careful." "That goes to you too," Jada sighed. Blake's definition of careful did not match with the real one Arda already knew, just from seeing the other people interact with him. Apparently, in Sector 8, the blonde was quite popular for his likable personality, quick thinking, improvisation, and also his decision-making and leadership skills. Yet he was also notorious for taking risks and being reckless at times. Still, he wasn't expecting Blake to abruptly charge up the side of a building toward a group of hawks near the edge of the city, jump off, catching the hawks so off guard that they didn't even have time to attack him. Humans usually didn't run towards them, and shoot 2 of them with his gun before using his stick to attach himself onto a path that was alarmingly upside down. He hung on by one arm for a few seconds before pulling his body up, somehow only using the strength of one arm, magnetically attached to the stick with the wristband or not, and standing upside down high above the ground, his ponytail swaying in the snowstorm. Arda had to squint, pulling out his gun as the hawks regained their senses and circled Blake. The 2 he shot had been knocked out of the air and fell a few meters in front of them with 2 silent thuds, muffled by the snow and the wind. "I want to ask, what is Zeta's definition of careful again?" Arda queried Jada and Tink, who had pulled out their guns. "Oh, not that," Jada assured him. "He's just special." "The kid needs therapy, more like," Tink said. She loaded her gun and clicked the safety off as she started forward toward the falling hawks, her eyes peeled. "Then again, we all do." Tink was on the younger side, but she was several years older than Blake, in her 20s. She seemed to like calling them kids in an affectionate way. "I'll watch your backs," Arda shouted over the wind. He would be no use up on the pass. He knew he wasn't yet used to moving so freely while defying gravity, and that would hinder him. "I'll go up then. Gotta save that idiot's skin." Jada ran forward, toward the building, and ran up it swiftly, like an anime character from TV shows on Earth. Arda lifted his gun and aimed, instinctively knowing what to do after watching Jada, Blake, and Tink, not to even mention his knowledge he had beforehand, even if the gun was different from the ones on Earth. He loaded it, clicked off the safety, and aimed, his arms straight, 2 hands on it to keep it from shaking, peering down the barrel. The wind was going to be a slight problem as the magnets were light and would be blown off course more easily than a bullet. Combined with the moving hawks, it wasn't an easy shot. They were all circling at a constant pace, in an oval route. He noticed several of them in a vague line. If he could line up and time the shots correctly, using the wind to his advantage, he might be able to fire off a few poison magnets and have them all hit without changing trajectory. He calculated the angle, the wind course and speed, the hawk's positions and paths, and aimed. Then he fired off 3 at once. Moments later, 3 temporarily paralyzed hawks thudded down on the ground in front of Tink. Celestials! Arda, great shots! She called out. Arda merely nodded and watched as Jada took over, crouching on the side of the building and leaning her back against the wall, shooting down the hawks one by one. After his initial shots, Arda didn't need to do anything, as Blake and Jada finished the rest off with only a few close calls. They walked down, dropped onto the ground as Arda was collecting the magnets, and Tink was paralyzing them more permanently with a different gun. Blake, Arda said, that was not necessary. Blake placed a gloved hand on his chest. Hey, I was just distracting them. I know you guys were there. Jada is one of our best shots ever, and Tink had the kill gun. And you're the walking encyclopedia with all the knowledge in the world, so I figured you could use a gun. By the way, those were some seriously impressive shots. I think you just stole Jada's title. Said the girl stuck her guns in her belt again. Don't get too confident just yet, I'll get it back. Instead of being salty about it, however, she grinned at Arda under her mask. Okay, but to be completely honest, that was outstanding. Have you ever used a gun before? Arda shook his head. I had prior knowledge and I learned how to load it from watching you. It's quite simple. Loading and pulling the trigger isn't the hard part, Jada insisted. You shot 3 hawks in a row with a straight face without pausing at all. If I reached that level, I would be bragging about it until I have no friends anymore. In which case I would be sad, but not really. You can reach that level, Arda told her. It's not a matter of if. You just need to keep practicing. It was simply fact, but Jada lit up anyway. You know what? As the unofficial walking encyclopedia, I'll take your word for it. Tink rolled her eyes behind her goggles, standing up from her work at tying the hawks together with a rope and putting them in the bag. Alright. Break it up, kids. We still have to go to the rural area. This isn't enough for everyone in the sector. There was a patrol a few days ago saying they saw a small herd of caribou in the forest on the edge of the eastern rural land. They might still be there. Caribou? Blake explained. That would sustain us for much longer. It's been years since we saw the last animal in the deer family. We better hurry then. We won't be the only ones after them, with the Imperialists coming closer from the coast. Let's take the ground road, Arda suggested, and move fast. We can make it back here to the relative safety of the city at nightfall if we're quick. Good idea, Blake agreed. We might avoid confrontation with the Imperialists that way too. Okay, Northsphere, let's move out!